I didn't come out of that marriage unbroken, but I came out awake, and that mattered more than anything they had tried to take from me. Some stories end with justice, some end with closure. Mine ended with freedom, and the quiet, powerful knowledge that I survived something designed to erase me, and I am still here. Before this story truly begins, take a moment to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss any of our top-notch, deeply moving tales. These are stories that stay with you long after the final word is spoken. I remember the exact moment my world cracked open. It was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, my wedding day. The sun was perfect, the hall glowed with white and gold, and everyone kept saying how lucky I was. Lucky bride, perfect match, a union blessed by God and destiny. That's when my photographer pulled me aside, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet grip on my wrist and a look I had never seen on his face before. "This marriage will not hold," he said. I laughed. I actually laughed, because who says that to a bride minutes before she walks down the aisle? I told him he was being unprofessional, maybe nervous, maybe jealous. I reminded him he was there to take pictures, not deliver prophecies. But he didn't smile back. Instead, he leaned closer and whispered words that still haunt me. "I've been photographing weddings for 20 years. I see what others don't, and what I see here is danger." My heart skipped, but pride spoke louder than fear. I walked away. The music started. The doors opened. Everyone stood. As I took my first step toward the altar, I felt it, a strange heaviness, like the air itself was warning me. My groom smiled, but something in his eyes felt distant, almost rehearsed. Still, I kept walking, because when you're in love, you ignore the signs. When you're hopeful, you silence the truth. And when destiny whispers, we often refuse to listen. I said, "I do." And with those two words, I unknowingly stepped into the most unbearable discovery of my life. They say the first night of marriage is supposed to feel sacred. Soft laughter, nervous smiles, two souls finally alone. Ours felt like a performance that ended too late. The wedding hall emptied slowly, chairs scraping the floor, petals crushed under careless feet. Guests hugged us, offered prayers, whispered envy. My mother cried tears of relief. His father shook my hand a little too firmly, like he was sealing a deal rather than blessing a union. Through it all, my photographer watched me, not smiling, not shooting, just watching. When I finally met his eyes, he lifted his camera and snapped one last photo. The flash went off like lightning. Something about it made my chest tighten. That was the last image he ever took of us together. Our hotel room was expensive, too expensive. Rose petals covered the bed in the shape of a heart. Champagne waited in a silver bucket. Everything screamed romance. Yet the silence between us was loud. My husband loosened his tie and walked straight to the window, turning his back to me. He stared down at the city lights like a man counting exits. "You're quiet," I said, trying to laugh it off. "So are you," he replied. His voice was calm but cold, not the voice I'd fallen in love with, not the voice that used to call me at midnight just to hear me breathe. I told myself he was tired. I always told myself that. When he finally turned around, his phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times. He checked it quickly, then locked the screen. "Who is that?" I asked. "Work," he said immediately. "On our wedding night." I nodded anyway. He poured champagne, handed me a glass, and raised his. "To forever," he said. I touched my glass to his. The sound was sharp, almost like a crack. Later that night, while he was in the shower, his phone buzzed again. I didn't mean to look, but the screen lit up on the table.
Unknown number. Is she asleep yet? My heart stopped. Another message followed before I could breathe. Remember what you promised. Don't mess this up. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I locked it back exactly the way I found it and sat on the edge of the bed, my wedding dress still on, my skin cold. That's when I remembered the photographer's words. I see what others don't. The shower stopped. I wiped my face quickly, forcing a smile just as he stepped out, steam following him like smoke after a fire. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yes," I lied. He studied me for a second too long, then turned off the light. As darkness swallowed the room, I realized something terrifying. I was lying beside a man I had just married, and I didn't know who he really was. Outside, thunder rolled, and deep inside me, a voice whispered, "This marriage will not hold."
The morning after the wedding is where the real nightmare begins. Morning arrived without warmth or celebration. I woke to a silence that felt deliberate, as though the room itself was holding its breath. I reached out instinctively, expecting to find my husband beside me, but my hand met only cold sheets. His side of the bed was untouched, perfectly arranged, as if no one had slept there at all. I sat up, my heart racing, and scanned the room. The curtains were drawn open. The bathroom was dry. The champagne bottle from the night before was gone. So was his phone. I checked the time, just past 6 in the morning. Wrapped in the hotel robe, I walked to the window. From above, I saw him outside near a black car I did not recognize. A woman stood with him, close enough that distance no longer meant anything. She handed him a small envelope. He took it without hesitation, sliding it into his jacket. Then she reached up and touched his face, familiarly, intimately, like someone who had done it many times before. My legs weakened. By the time I turned away from the window and reached for the door, they were already gone. He returned about 30 minutes later, calm and composed, as though nothing unusual had happened. He smiled, greeted me, and said he had gone for a walk because he couldn't sleep. The lie was smooth, practiced. I studied his face, searching for a crack, but there was none, only control. At breakfast, my phone vibrated. It was a message from my photographer, the first since the wedding. "Did you sleep well?" I hesitated before replying, then told him the truth. Not really. His response came immediately, because I didn't. A moment later, another message followed, heavier than the last. "I almost didn't send this, but you deserve the truth." He sent a photograph, not from the ceremony, not from the reception, but from the night before. The timestamp confirmed it. My husband stood outside the hotel with the same woman I had just seen, their bodies angled toward each other in a way that left no room for doubt. Beneath the image was a short line that made the room tilt around me. "She's been with him for 3 years." I excused myself and locked myself in the restroom. In the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. My wedding makeup had faded, my eyes looked hollow, and the red of my lips felt like a cruel reminder of vows I had spoken too easily. Another message came through. That's not the worst part. I asked him what he meant, my fingers shaking as I typed. There was a pause, long enough to make my chest tighten. Then the reply appeared. "The reason I said the marriage won't hold isn't because of infidelity. It's because I've seen this man before." Something cold settled deep inside me. In that moment, I understood that what I had married into was not just a lie, but a history, and I was only beginning to see how far back it went. The photographer's last message echoed in my head long after I slipped the phone back into my purse and returned to the table.
My husband was buttering toast, calm and unbothered, asking me what plans I had for the day like nothing in the world had shifted. I nodded at the right moments. I smiled when required. Inside, something was quietly breaking. We checked out at a hotel just before noon. In the elevator, his hand found mine, warm and firm, the same hand that had held mine at the altar. I wondered how easily a hand could lie. When the doors opened, the same black car waited outside, no driver in sight. He guided me toward it without explanation. "Whose car is this?" I asked. "A friend's," he said. That answer had started to mean nothing. As we drove, I watched the city thin out, buildings giving way to long roads and silence. This was not the route to our new home. When I asked where we were going, he told me he had a surprise for me, something special to begin our marriage. Surprise. That word used to thrill me. Now it made my stomach tighten. My phone vibrated once in my lap. A single sentence from the photographer. "I know where he is taking you." My breath caught. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My husband glanced at me, his eyes flicking briefly to the phone, then back to the road. "You trust me, don't you?" he asked softly. There was something rehearsed in the question, like he had asked it many times before. "Yes," I said, because fear hadn't yet taught me how to be brave. We arrived at an old estate on the edge of the city, hidden behind rusted gates and overgrown trees. The building looked abandoned, but the gates opened smoothly, electronically. Someone maintained this place. Someone expected us. Inside, the house smelled of polish and secrets. Heavy curtains blocked out most of the light. Portraits lined the walls, men in dark suits, women with expressions too serious to belong to happiness. One of the portraits stopped me cold. The man in the frame looked exactly like my husband. Same eyes, same jaw, same unsettling calm, only younger. "Who is that?" I asked. He didn't slow down. "My father," he said. I followed him into a sitting room where a woman sat waiting, the same woman from outside the hotel. Up close, she was older than I thought, elegant, controlled. Her eyes assessed me the way one inspects an item just delivered. "So this is her," she said. Not hello, not welcome. Her words landed like a verdict. I finally found my voice. "Who are you?" She smiled faintly. "I'm the reason your photographer is afraid." My heart began to pound so loudly I was sure they could hear it. She explained, calmly, carefully, like someone reciting facts they'd long accepted. This family did not marry for love. They married for continuity, for legacy, for protection. Wives were chosen, not cherished. Promises were contracts. Children were expectations. The woman had been with my husband not as a lover, but as a guardian of the system, a watcher, someone who made sure traditions were followed. "You were selected," she told me. "Your background, your obedience, your silence." I looked at my husband, waiting for him to deny it. He didn't. Instead, he said, "I tried to make it real." That hurt more than the truth. My phone buzzed again. One final message from the photographer. "If you're reading this inside the house, do not agree to anything. You are not the first wife. You may be the last if you choose wrong." I felt the walls closing in, the weight of generations pressing down on my chest. In that moment, I understood what unbearable truly meant. Not the betrayal, not the lies, but the realization that my life had been planned without my consent. And as my husband reached for my hand again, I knew this was the moment that would decide whether I survived this marriage or disappeared into it. I didn't answer anyone after that. Not the photographer, not my husband. I sat there, listening to the low murmur of voices in the other room, trying to steady my breathing while my mind raced ahead of my body. The woman spoke again, her tone measured, almost gentle,
as if she were explaining a difficult concept to a child. She told me the family believed love was unreliable, feelings faded, desire weakened, but structure endured. Marriage, to them, was not a beginning, it was a mechanism. I asked her how many wives there had been before me. She didn't answer directly. She just said, "Enough to perfect the process." That was when my throat tightened, not because of fear alone, but grief for the girl I had been just days ago, dreaming of a future built on affection and trust. That girl felt very far away now. My husband finally spoke, telling me I was safe, that no one intended to harm me, that all they wanted was my cooperation. He said it the way someone reassures a hostage without realizing the cruelty of the word safe when freedom is already gone. I asked him if he loved me. He looked away before answering. "I wanted to," he said. That was the closest thing to honesty I had heard since the wedding. They gave me time to think, or at least they said they did. I was shown to a bedroom at the far end of the house, large, immaculate, and unmistakably locked from the outside. Alone, I sat on the edge of the bed and let the weight of everything finally collapse onto me. I cried quietly at first, then without restraint, my body shaking as reality set in. I thought of my family, my mother's smile at the wedding, my father's proud tears, how convinced they were that I was stepping into something beautiful. I wondered how long it would take before they noticed something was wrong, or if they ever would. My phone buzzed again. The photographer. I typed back before fear could stop me, telling him where I was, what I had been told, how trapped I felt. His reply came slower this time, each word deliberate. "I photographed a wedding here once, years ago. Another woman. She vanished 6 months later. Everyone said she traveled abroad. No one ever heard from her again."
My hands went numb. He told me he had recognized the estate the moment we drove through the gates. That was why he had warned me. That was why he couldn't sleep. He had spent years regretting his silence back then, years wondering if speaking up sooner might have changed something. "You still have a chance," he wrote, "but you cannot play along for long. The longer you stay quiet, the harder it will be to leave." Night fell slowly. Somewhere in the house, doors opened and closed. Footsteps echoed, then faded. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing that the unbearable discovery was not just who my husband was, but how easily my life could be rewritten by people who believed they had the right to do so. By morning, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. This marriage was not a mistake. It was a trap. And if I didn't find a way out soon, I would become another story no one finished telling. We rode on into the night, and by the time the house had grown dark and quiet, I realized just how carefully every step, every glance, every word had been watched. I wasn't just living in this house, I was under a microscope. Every misstep could be noticed, cataloged, and used against me. Dinner was silent. My husband and the woman sat across from me, their conversation hushed but deliberate. I pretended to listen, sipped my wine, and smiled when expected. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I knew the walls of this house ran deeper than the gates outside. Escape was not about doors, it was about knowledge. After dinner, the woman finally spoke. Her voice was soft but commanding. "You'll learn quickly," she said. "You may think this is a choice, but you have none. The family does not allow mistakes." I nodded, forcing my fear into composure. "I understand," I said. My voice didn't tremble, though inside my heart felt like it had been carved out. They showed me a room filled with old photographs and letters, some dating back decades. Faces of women stared at me from yellowed paper, each labeled carefully.
The dates made my stomach turn. Some disappeared, some married into other branches, but a few never had their stories finished. The woman leaned closer to me. "You'll be the next," she said quietly, almost as if testing me. Her eyes searched mine, looking for weakness. I swallowed, forcing a calm that I didn't feel. Later, when I returned to my room, I found my phone buzzing again. The photographer's messages lit the screen. "Do not trust anyone, not him, not her, not the walls around you." I felt tears rising, but I forced them down. I couldn't afford to let anyone see my fear. Then came a photo, not just any photo, it was a picture of a hidden compartment in the study, filled with documents I wasn't supposed to see. Contracts, letters, receipts, and a series of photographs of the women who had come before me. My heart raced as I scrolled through. I recognized one of them in a photograph from decades ago. The resemblance to me was uncanny. "They pick women who can disappear without a trace," the photographer wrote. "You need to leave now." But leave how? I didn't even know the house, let alone the people who controlled it. Every corridor, every hallway felt like a trap. Every door, every locked room, a cage. I realized then that surviving this marriage wasn't just about patience, it was about strategy, cunning, and knowing exactly when to strike. That night I lay awake, listening to the quiet creak of the house, imagining the eyes that might be watching from behind the walls. My mind raced with plans. I would not be another photograph, another name in the lineage. I would find a way out. But the most terrifying thought was this: the longer I stayed, the more entangled I would become. And if they caught even a hint of rebellion too soon, there might be no coming back. And yet, deep down, I felt a fire ignite. Small, fragile, but undeniable. It was my only weapon against a world that wanted to erase me. I would fight. I had no choice.
The following days became a careful balance between obedience and observation. Every word I spoke, every glance I made, every movement was measured. I had learned quickly that even a hint of defiance drew attention, and attention here was dangerous. I spent the mornings in the study, ostensibly learning about the family's history, the rules, the traditions. But really, I was searching for weaknesses, escape routes, anything that could give me leverage. The portraits on the walls seemed to follow me, each face a silent reminder of what could happen if I faltered. The women who had come before me were no longer just names on paper, they were warnings. My husband remained calm, almost unnervingly so. He watched me, sometimes speaking softly, sometimes disappearing for hours with the woman who had introduced me to the estate. At first, I had believed his calmness was protection. Now I realized it was strategy. He was as much a part of the system as the woman who had briefed me, and perhaps even more dangerous because I had trusted him once. One evening, I overheard a conversation through a cracked door. My husband's voice was low, urgent, clipped. "She's quicker than I expected," the woman said. "She'll either adapt or she won't. If she doesn't, she becomes a liability." Liability. The word slammed into me like a physical blow. I was not a bride here. I was an asset, a piece in a game I hadn't agreed to play. My hands trembled as I retreated to my room, but my mind sharpened. That night, the photographer's messages arrived again. "You're running out of time. They're testing you. Do not make a mistake." I realized then that the fire inside me, the one I had thought fragile, was the only thing keeping me alive. Every meal, every lesson, every staged conversation was part of their experiment. I needed to respond in kind. I needed to learn their rules, predict their moves, and find a way to reclaim my life before they determined my fate for me. The following morning, I noticed something I hadn't before. A small service door at the end of the hall, partially hidden behind a tapestry. It wasn't locked.
I didn't know where it led, but it was a crack in the armor of this house, a glimmer of possibility. I watched the staff, memorized the routines of my husband and the woman who oversaw the estate, and marked every opportunity. I started planning, quietly, in my mind, mapping a route, imagining the moment I could escape without warning. Each detail mattered. Every step was a decision. By the end of that day, I knew one thing with certainty. Surviving this house would require more than courage. It would require patience, cunning, and the willingness to sacrifice everything I had believed about love, trust, and marriage. And still, beneath the fear, beneath the strategy, beneath the exhaustion, the fire inside me grew. Not just a flicker anymore. It was a steady, unyielding flame. I would not be erased. I would not be a photograph, a name, a warning on a wall. I would fight.
The days blurred into a carefully controlled routine, each moment a test of my patience, my observation, my nerve. But one evening, everything shifted. It started with a knock on my bedroom door, soft, deliberate, measured. My husband's voice followed almost immediately. "May I come in?" I hesitated. I had learned to hesitate. Every choice here carried weight. Finally, I nodded. He stepped in, holding a single envelope in his hand. No expression, no pretense, just a calm that sent a shiver down my spine. He placed it on the bedside table and sat across from me. "You need to see this," he said. Inside the envelope were photographs, hundreds of them, of me. Not posed, not staged, just me, in the hotel, at the airport, walking through the streets, even moments inside the estate. My life documented without my knowledge, catalogued like inventory. "This is what happens when someone underestimates the system," he said softly. I felt my stomach twist. Fear, anger, betrayal, every emotion collided inside me. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. "Because you're different," he replied. "The others, they didn't notice. They didn't fight. They adapted too quickly, or they disappeared quietly. You question everything." I swallowed hard, trying to force calm over the wildfire inside me. I realized then that this wasn't just a test of obedience, it was a test of spirit. And my spirit, no matter how trapped, would not break. "I want out," I said. His eyes flickered, not anger, not surprise, but something heavier, almost like respect. "Out?" he repeated. "Do you know what you're asking?" "Yes," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I know, and I know I won't survive if I stay. Not the real me, not the woman you or they expect me to be." He leaned back, silent for a long moment, studying me. Then he spoke, almost reluctantly. "Leaving is not simple. This house, this family, it doesn't forgive mistakes or rebellion." I let that sink in, the weight of generations pressing down, the lives erased, the women who had come before me. And yet, beneath it all, a fire roared. I would not become another name on a wall. I would not vanish quietly. "You'll need allies," he said finally, his tone almost a warning. "Not everyone here is as loyal as they seem, and not every ally is safe." I understood immediately. Every person I had met, every face I had seen could be a threat or a key. I had to decide who to trust, how to maneuver, and when to act. One wrong move, and the trap would close permanently. That night, I lay awake, planning, calculating, watching shadows move in the corridors.
I realized the truth of the photographer's warning. Survival was not about hiding or patience. It was about courage, cunning, and timing. I would play their game, but only on my terms. I would learn their secrets, anticipate their moves, and strike at the moment when escape was possible. The fire inside me had grown into a blaze, unstoppable now, consuming fear and doubt alike. I was no longer just a bride in a trap. I was a woman who had recognized the chains and who was ready to break them. And as the house slept around me, I whispered to myself, "They think they control the story, but I am still the author of my own destiny."
The night stretched long and heavy. Shadows moved across the walls of the estate, quiet, deliberate, like the house itself was breathing. I stayed awake, listening to every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind through the broken shutters. The fire inside me refused to die. It was no longer just survival, it was defiance. I waited until the house settled into silence. Footsteps had faded. Conversations were distant, muffled behind closed doors. I moved carefully, wrapping my robe tightly around me, my heart pounding with every step toward the service door I had discovered days before. It was narrow, partially hidden, yet it held a promise, a crack in the fortress of control that had been imposed on me. I paused before opening it, pressing my ear against the wood. Nothing. No one. I slowly pushed it open and stepped into a narrow corridor, darker than I had anticipated. Dust hung in the air, thick and stale. I could feel my pulse in my throat, every nerve alive, warning me, yet urging me forward. Then I heard it. Voices. Low. Urgent. My husband and the woman. They were discussing me. My stomach twisted, but I stayed still, pressed against the wall. "She's more aware than I thought," my husband said. "She's planning something. She'll need guidance, or she'll destroy herself before we have the chance to manage it." I swallowed hard. They didn't know I was listening, yet they were revealing everything: strategy, concern, control. I could use this. I could anticipate their moves. I continued down the corridor and found another door, an exit this time. Light spilled faintly from the crack beneath it, promising freedom beyond the walls that had been suffocating me. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of hope, and I quietly tested the handle. Locked, of course. I noticed a small key hanging on a nail above a low shelf, almost invisible. I reached for it, heart hammering, and took it silently. This was it, my chance. I retraced my steps carefully, memorizing every shadow, every hallway, every creak. When I returned to my bedroom, I realized I had been gone long enough that my husband would begin to notice. I sat on the edge of the bed, my fingers wrapped around the key, my mind racing. I knew I couldn't act alone. I needed to plan, to time every step, to ensure that when I moved, I wouldn't be stopped. Hours later, when the house was quiet again, I made my move. The corridor was darker now, the only sound my own controlled breathing. Every step was measured, precise. I reached the locked exit door and slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click, a sound that echoed like liberation in my ears. I pushed the door slowly, testing the light beyond it. Freedom, real freedom. I could see the trees beyond, the faint glow of the city lights in the distance. My heart soared. I stepped through, silent as a shadow, the wind brushing against my face as if welcoming me back to the world I had nearly lost. But just as I began to run, a hand grabbed my wrist, strong and unrelenting. My husband, calm, almost eerily so.
"You really think it's that simple?" he whispered, eyes cold but curious. I pulled my arm back, taking a step, then another, ignoring the fear that threatened to root me in place. "It's not simple," I said, voice steady, "but I've learned something you underestimated. I fight." For the first time since I had arrived in this house, I felt the full force of my own power, not just the strength to survive, but the strength to reclaim my life. He didn't move to stop me again. Instead, he studied me, the flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. I didn't wait for him to act. I ran, the night swallowing me, the estate behind me, every step taking me farther from the chains they had tried to impose. And in that darkness, I realized this was only the beginning. The fire inside me burned brighter than ever. No walls, no legacy, no control could hold me now. I was free. Or at least, I was free enough to fight for the life I deserved.
The streets were cold, quiet, and unfamiliar, yet they felt infinitely freer than the walls I had left behind. My legs ached, but I didn't stop. Every step was fueled by a mixture of adrenaline, fear, and something I hadn't felt in days: hope. The photographer's warnings had been clear, but I had taken a leap anyway. I couldn't stay trapped any longer. I found a small cafe still open and slipped inside, huddling in a corner where no one would notice me. My hands shook as I dialed the photographer's number. The line connected, and I heard his voice, gravelly, tired, but relieved. "You made it," he said simply. I think so," I whispered, letting exhaustion seep into my words. "But it's not over, is it?" "No," he replied. "They'll be looking for you. And your husband, he's not just a man. He's part of the system, part of the reason so many women disappeared." I shivered. It wasn't fear alone. It was the bitter truth I had finally grasped. He had been right from the start. This wasn't about love. It wasn't about marriage. It was about power, control, legacy. And I had been thrust into it blindly. "Where do I go?" I asked. "First," he said, "you rest. You let your body recover. Then we plan. Every move counts. They know your routines. They will anticipate your instincts. We need to stay ahead." I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to breathe past the panic, the memories, the endless what-ifs. I thought of the women before me, the portraits on the walls, the lives erased in silence. I thought of the house, the estate, the calculated calm of the people who had tried to trap me. And then I thought of myself, the woman who refused to disappear. Hours passed, the cafe emptied, the night deepened. When I finally left, it was with a purpose I had never felt before. I moved through the city like a shadow, careful, silent, every step deliberate. I couldn't go home, not yet, not until I had clarity, a plan, a way to turn the tables. The photographer met me later, under the cover of darkness. He brought documents, photographs, and notes, the accumulated history of the estate, the family, and the women who had vanished before me. Each page was a revelation, each image a warning. "This is what they've done," he said softly. "This is why they're dangerous. This is why you need to be smarter, faster, stronger than anyone who's tried to control you." I looked at the papers, the photographs, the meticulous records. I felt a chill, but I also felt the fire inside me blaze hotter than ever. "They underestimated me," I said. "Yes," he agreed, "and that is your advantage." We spent the night planning, mapping every route, every potential ally, every weakness we could exploit. By dawn, exhaustion had settled into my bones, but I felt alive in a way I hadn't in weeks. The fear was still there, simmering, but it was tempered by purpose.
I realized, finally, that the photographer wasn't just a warning anymore. He was a guide, a partner in my fight for freedom. Together, we would confront the house, the system, and the man I had once trusted with my life. And I knew this: when the time came, there would be no room for hesitation, no second chances, no mercy. I would take back everything they had tried to steal from me. Because I was no longer the frightened bride who had walked into that house. I was a woman on fire, and nothing could stop her now.
By dawn, the city felt different, quieter, watchful, like it knew something was about to end. I sat in the back seat of the photographer's car, staring out at streets that were slowly waking up, people stepping into ordinary lives that suddenly felt impossibly precious to me. I hadn't slept, but my mind was clear in a way it had never been before. "This is the last chance," he said, as we parked several blocks away from the estate. "Once we do this, there's no going back." I nodded. There was nothing to go back to anyway. We didn't rush. That was the mistake people like them expected: panic, recklessness, desperation. Instead, we moved with evidence: the documents, the photographs, the timelines, names, dates, patterns, lives that had been quietly erased and replaced with polite lies. We met with a lawyer first, one the photographer trusted. As the files spread across the desk, the room grew heavy. The lawyer stopped asking questions halfway through and just stared at me. "You're lucky you got out," he said finally. "Another few weeks, and this would have been much harder." Lucky wasn't the word I would have chosen, but alive was enough. By midday, the police were involved. Not the kind that arrived with sirens and drama, but the kind that listened, took notes, and asked very specific questions. I told my story slowly, carefully, forcing myself not to rush through the parts that hurt the most. Every detail mattered. Every silence I had once kept now worked against them. When they went to the estate, I didn't go with them. I couldn't. I sat instead, hands wrapped around a cup of untouched tea, while the photographer stayed nearby, grounding me in small human ways, breathing, sitting, waiting. Hours passed. Then the call came. Search warrants executed, records seized, multiple arrests. The woman who had overseen everything was taken first. My husband was detained later that evening, calm as ever, until the evidence stopped being abstract and started using names and faces, mine included. I didn't feel victory when I heard. I felt something quieter, heavier, like a door finally closing. In the weeks that followed, the story unraveled publicly. Headlines called it shocking, unthinkable, unbelievable. People argued online about how something like that could exist unnoticed for so long. I stopped reading after the first few days. They weren't talking about the women. They were talking about the spectacle. I focused on healing instead. Some nights were still hard. I woke up reaching for air, for light, for reassurance that walls weren't closing in again. But each morning, I chose myself in small ways, walking outside, calling my mother, sitting in silence without fear of being watched. The photographer checked on me often. We didn't talk much about the past anymore. We didn't need to. What mattered was that he had spoken when it counted, and that I had listened, even if it took time. One afternoon, months later, I stood in front of a mirror holding my wedding ring for the first time since everything ended. I looked at it for a long time, then set it down and walked away. That chapter was over. I didn't come out of that marriage unbroken, but I came out awake, and that mattered more than anything they had tried to take from me. Some stories end with justice. Some end with closure. Mine ended with freedom and the quiet, powerful knowledge that I survived something designed to erase me. And I am still here.